Another CEO Wisdom podcast, guys, with Isaiah Bollinger. He is co-founder and CEO at Trellis, and he is also co-host at the Hard Truth About B2B Commerce podcast. So we're going to talk about a whole array of interesting topics today, namely podcasting, agency, running a business, this current economic climate with me, which me and Isaiah were talking prior to this pod. Obviously, e-commerce, Shopify marketing, and everything in between. Isaiah, welcome to the pods. Glad to have you on. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and Trellis?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I started Trellis 11 years ago. So it's been quite a journey, a lot of ups and downs. Started Trellis as actually an SEO agency. Kind of realized that SEO is becoming more and more content driven, and at the time I kind of wanted to move more into kind of the tangible development space, something where I could deliver kind of like more of an end state. So we pivoted pretty early on to e-commerce and developing e-commerce websites. This is the early days of like Magento. People that have been in e-commerce, I think they kind of all know about Magento from, it was one of the kind of the main platforms. Still a major platform, but now it's owned by Adobe, so it's changed quite a bit. And then we scaled, grew the business. We're about 70 people now. And we kind of position ourselves as like full service e-commerce for Shopify, Bigcommerce, Magento, and then headless is kind of like the new buzzword. So we do some headless commerce, which we can explain if you want to get into that as well.
Yeah, tell me about headless because I've heard about it, but not sure what it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion around it. There's headless, composable. In my opinion, they're kind of like interchangeable words, like this composable commerce, headless commerce. They're kind of the same concept. Really what it is like kind of decoupling your front end from your back end. So it's definitely a more complicated infrastructure. It's a more modern, kind of useful tech stack, but it's definitely more complicated for kind of like the simpler, smaller businesses. We don't recommend it for. So it's typically a use case when you're kind of outgrowing your core platform, and let's say you have multiple platforms or use cases, like you might have a content platform and a commerce platform, and you want it to roll up to one front end. You could have one front end with different back ends, and the customer would just see like the same front end. You wouldn't need like a subdomain. So
Right. The agency itself, why did you decided to start it? Because my thesis is I have these various agencies. Hopefully they can become my cash cows. Maybe I can sassify them and I use them to learn while getting paid from my clients, right? So that I can go after my moonshots. What was your thesis behind your agency?
yeah, I mean, I think honestly part of it was just betting on myself. And at the time I was pretty young and I was working for, somewhere out, kind of a legacy media company that I didn't feel like was evolving that quickly. So at the time I just felt like there was a need for kind of like tailored, more consultative, kind of custom services based on the needs of that particular small business. And then over time that kind of evolved, and I'd say our thesis now today is that we feel like there's, room and a gap in the market for kind of like a small mid-market, full service e-commerce provider that can help with, scaling the traffic, marketing growth, creative branding, and all the development and technical expertise kind of in one-stop shop. Not all of our clients do all of our services, but they have that, kind of luxury of being able to if they need to.
How do you get your new clients? Do you do outbound?
We're starting to do a little bit of outbound. We've struggled with outbound. I wouldn't say we have like a good, effective, consistent outbound channel, but we're dabbling in it and we're trying to kind of experiment and build that out. Historically, we've been very inbound driven, blog posts, content marketing, social media. We have the podcast, as you mentioned earlier. Partnerships is definitely a big one for us. So we invest a lot in the partnership network, the big ones for us, Shopify, Bigcommerce, Magento, and then some of the apps like Yotpo or Klaviyo, or we're starting to gain traction with some of the kind of like community beyond the core platforms of e-commerce. Events is starting to pick back up for us. So I think we're trying to refine our event strategy, get back out to events. We feel like in person, it was kind of a weird, in person was a big part of our strategy before COVID. going to events, and then that all went to shit and it all went to zero. So we're kind of like, this is the first year we're kind of like back at events, and it's a bit of an experiment, kind of like trying to get ROI, and they're expensive. I'm not gonna lie, it's hard to justify every event that we do. So we're still kind of learning with the cost from that. So
Yeah, let's talk a bit about that because I have done some outbound campaigns to target events businesses or to be a speaker at these events. I started my career networking, quote unquote. It never really worked. And I feel that a lot of time, I don't know, but people try to justify the like $1,500 tickets times three plus hotel plus time loss, in
I
the fact
know.
saying that they met someone magical. But I talk with various guests on this pod about the fact that, yeah, like physical is cool because, yeah, back from COVID, people want to socialize. Plus, everything is online nowadays. So there might be this positive factor. But have you seen clear cut ROI via other channels like podcasting, for
Yeah.
example?
Yeah, we have seen clear cut a lot ROI where we potentially are very far along with a few big deals that we met them at the event. I think it's hard to necessarily guarantee that you're going to get direct sales from that event. We look at it as part of a greater branding strategy of like, people, the partners are there, people meet us, they get to know us, they've heard of us. Now we're on this show, maybe they hear this podcast, maybe they see me at the next event. So it's kind of like this ongoing kind of snowball. And we just think that in person is a big part of that. But we are, trying to get pretty tailored with going after specific accounts at the events as well to get some direct sales as well. So, but it's hard. It's hard to get the direct sales from the events for sure.
And who do you go after, typically speaking? What kind of e-commerce or what niches do you target specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say we focus on mid-market. So, we do a lot of B2B, obviously from the podcast. We have a lot of B2B e-commerce expertise. So that's heavily more in the manufacturing, distribution industries. So within that, it can get more niche, like electrical distribution or HVAC distribution or, kind of industrial supplies. We do a lot with like food and beverage, apparel, fashion. We've worked with a lot of industries, but we've tried to kind of narrow in on 5 or 6, which is kind of B2B, and we kind of lump B2B and distribution and manufacturing as kind of like this industrial kind of, it has a very logistical component to it. So even though they're just different industries, we kind of lump them together. And then outside of that, it's food and beverage, apparel and fashion, home and hardware. We kind of lump furniture into that. So we kind of look at like home goods, home and hardware as one space. And then health and beauty is another big one for us. And then we have a little bit of a passion for like toys and games and sports. So we're trying to kind of ease our way into that from like a personal perspective, but also there is obviously an e-com business there with toys and games and sports and whatnot. So
Love it. And what do your price tags look like? Is there like an MRR component in the business as well?
yeah, that's a great question. So we definitely go after mid-market. Like if I was to say there was one type of business, it would be kind of like, that mid-market 50 million, $100 million, let's say food and beverage or health and beauty type company. We do have much smaller clients. We have clients, that are maybe only doing $1 million in revenue. And then we have larger clients as well. But I would say like in general, we feel like we're a good fit for kind of that mid-market where they can invest in kind of like a decent sized projects. Some of them are in the low 6 figures, some are below 6 figures. And then once, let's say they're already live on the platform, whether we did it or someone else did it, then it's more maintenance and ongoing kind of marketing and improvements. And that's kind of like a blended MMR service that might range from like 5 to 10,000 a month up. So it starts generally 5 to 10,000 a month and then goes up to, can be tens of thousands a month, depending on how big the maintenance and kind of marketing services are.
And how much do you run per cohort? Is it like 10, 15 clients at a time, times 4 per year? So that's like a roster of 60 clients per year. Like, how do you go with
Yeah,
that?
that's a good actually analysis. Yeah, we have a roster of about, I would say, 60 to 70 clients a year. We've generally grown through the clients becoming kind of larger or doing more different services, so getting more revenue per customer. So we've had a pretty steady flow of around 60 to 70 active customers at a time. I mean, I think, transparently, just like anyone in the space, we don't have 100% retention. So, someone might move on as a maintenance client. We've had some go in-house with the economy. We talked about the economy. Although I try and stay in touch because I haven't seen that much progress from some of the in-house work that they're doing. So you never know, they might come back. But then, we're getting new projects as some of them might progress. So, we're definitely trying to grow. I think we'd love to see that get to maybe 70, 80, to closer to 100 active clients. But it's certainly tough in this economy. I think people are pulling back on, generally, we're seeing more conservativeness in the economy.
So how do you scale to 2 to 10 million a year in that environment? And what kind of challenges differ from the 0 to 2 million period?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of scale and growing pains that we're still dealing with, but I think we're starting to kind of like mature and stabilize a little bit. And we've been kind of doubling down on efficiency instead of like growth and people growth. It was the beginning was like kind of building that early stage, director kind of manager layer, getting those first managers. That's really painful and difficult because now they have to go from doing the work to doing a little bit of management, and the management kind of comes off of the owners. And then, even beyond that, we've gotten to the point where we have a little bit of sub-management below that. So we have, owner layer, kind of executive layer, then a director layer. And then we have even a few positions that are kind of doing some light management below the directors. I'd say like finding the right balance of like the number of directors to number of employees below, and then figuring out like how much direct work do the managers do versus just manage. It becomes a profitability challenge too, because the managers aren't that billable. You have the owners that aren't very billable. So now the individual contributors, as we call them, ICs, have to make up for all of that, and keeping them all busy is challenging. So there's a balance. It's a constant kind of resourcing balancing act that's pretty difficult.
Right.
So.
The podcast itself, me, I use it for insights. I use it to connect with smart folks like you, and who knows, we might do business together in 10, 20 years, or even tomorrow, who knows?
Yeah.
You are connected with other folks that I can reach out to. It's pretty exponential, this business model. It's one of my favorite nowadays. What is your thesis behind the
podcast specifically when you're saying that?
Yeah. So it's like, what is that also your model, getting insights, connecting, potentially making money? There's the audience, there's the sponsors, so it's pretty exponential. What was your thoughts?
It was a mix of all of that. Yeah, I mean, we have especially saw it as a way to create content actually more efficiently, because now we have audio content. We're on Spotify, which is a whole new channel for us from before we started the podcast. We actually record the YouTube videos, so we're on YouTube, and we actually create blog posts based off it. And then, it creates, a network effect of, I met the CEO of a pretty solid, prominent software company that we may end up partnering with. It may open up a new channel for us with that relationship. It's an opportunity to kind of talk to potential customers too, or kind of an icebreaker, right? Like, you're not hard selling them on Trellis. You're like, hey, let's just join the podcast and let's get to know each other before we try and like sell you on Trellis and everything. So it was a mix of kind of all of the above. But yeah, it's a great multi-channel, efficient way to get content, especially in thought leadership out there. Like I think I was also just getting burnt out with just purely writing. The written form content was really kind of burning me out. I did a lot of that in my career. I've written hundreds, probably thousands of pages, and I honestly enjoy this format a lot more. Like it's much more fun to me, but sitting down and writing blog posts, like, it's hard for me to get motivated to do that in today's with just how long I did that in the past. So
right. Even with AI, but AI doesn't write as well as a human. It's not like that edgy, and we need that to make great content stick. The podcast, oddly enough, even at some point, it's almost therapy sometimes to speak with other founders and CEOs, and because it's lonely at the top, right? It's like, we're alone, we're fighting in this pretty much alone, and we don't have much other folks to talk to. I have my masterminds for that as well, but the pod, I mean, I speak to 5 to 10 entrepreneurs on a daily basis, and that helps quite a lot. And even to make friends, I've met like people physically doing that. So
That's awesome.
it's quite the blessing. The pod. I also observed your LinkedIn profile and saw like that you would advise folks. It's also something that I'm seeking to do nowadays. What's the dealio when you advise someone? Do you charge them monthly? Do you take shares? And is it like an exchange of a
Yeah,
meeting a month?
usually more of a share, so there's not an immediate, financial value. I'm kind of taking a more of a long-term view of hopefully helping the company. One of them I was a very small investor in, so that's something I'd like to do more of, but it's challenging. I've got a lot of different things that I'm working on, so it's hard to, do that financially. But yeah, mostly I take a long-term view, and I prefer that it's more of a long-term investment. So the shares, it's a pretty small amount. Obviously, they have to grow and get it, and we all know the VC funding. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, but hopefully they kind of get to the next level. So
Right.
yeah.
Last question. How do you maintain your sanity nowadays as CEOs and founders in crunch times, like these economic times? Like it can be hard. So how do you maintain your sanity and push through?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not easy, right? I definitely would say there are times where I don't do the best job of it. And so, but I do think things like this, going to events, meeting up in person, I really think going in like, whether it's a podcast or more of a kind of a casual format like this, to get content out there, or in-person events is a great kind of like, therapy away from the mundane, just kind of like being stuck on a keyboard and never like seeing anybody. But I've been trying to kind of like move more. I go on like walks. I'll take like walking breaks. It sounds very basic, but I think from COVID, just noticing like how much we're just sitting and not interacting with people. I think walking, and sometimes I'm just like, hey, we don't have to do a Zoom for everything. Like we can just talk on the phone, and I can like walk or kind of get away. And then yeah, I mean, I guess something that maybe it's not the healthiest mode, but I got recently back into some video games that kind of like take me away for maybe an hour, 2 hours a day, not every day, but every once in a while I'll do stuff like that, which I feel like is just like a good format to just like escape and get away from the stress of, like you said, it's a pretty high pressure business with the agency business, because
Right.
clients
Shout
are
out
up and
to Diablo 4. Um
down. Yep.
my
Started that, but I have a lot of friends that have picked that up. So I've been into League of Legends lately, but it's a hard game. So
Yeah, my brother is still like very much into gaming. Me, I gave up a couple of months ago. I used to play Rocket League and these types of things. But yeah, I'm eager to see some gameplay. I actually have a call scheduled with my brother so that I can share screen and I can see if it's just like the good old days, because that was the first video game that I kind of grew up on. And walks are a major hack, like a bunch of geniuses and famous business people walked a lot. Steve Jobs, Einstein, Travis Kalanick, ex-CEO of Uber, he had a circle in his office and he used to walk in his meetings around, and that's where he would get all his ideas. So thank you for that one. Where can people find out more about you and your podcast?
yeah, I mean, the website, trellis.co, if you go to the resources, it's right there. So we are .co, not .com. So Trellis, TRELLIS.co. You can also go to, we put it up on b2becommerce.io. So literally the word b2b ecommerce.io. So we own that domain. Eventually we'll hopefully make that into like a real kind of like media website, but we haven't. Spread very thin, you know how it is, right? And so that's been a little bit on the back burner, but they can also just check it out on Spotify. Search B2B e-commerce, or the hard truth about B2B e-commerce. That's part of the reason I did the podcast, is there's very few B2B e-commerce podcasts. There's a crap ton of B2C ones. So I was like, I don't compete in that. I don't have the firepower. So I think I can make something happen in B2B. So yeah.
Good niche right